to wherever it is you're going this morning, or else you're nestled on your couch watching us on your big screen, having cast us to whatever watching device you're doing. Owen, how are you?
Very well.
Bleary-eyed from staying up all night to watch the Oscars.
Yeah, I wish I didn't. So basically there was no sport on all weekend, and I had that betting itch to scratch to a certain extent. Not really. I was like, there was a very good bet right there on the Oscars betting. After getting Moonlight last year at 4-1 to win Best Picture, I felt a little bit confident in myself. I saw Get Out last week was at 11-1, which I thought was outrageously long. Last night comes into about 6-1. I'm thinking this is on. Get Out wins Best Original Screenplay, and I'm like, this thing is definitely on. And then it loses the Best Picture award. So my fiver on it at 11-1 was unfortunately a losing bet, but at least it got me to whatever 4 a.m. in the morning, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, having lost your shirt on, Phil Mickelson probably, like anybody else. So Phil Mickelson won last night. A pretty amazing victory for him in a playoff. But the other big winner last night in the Oscars was Icarus, which is the Brian Fogel documentary about the Russian anti-doping, non-existence of anti-doping basically, and the Sochi Olympics and the kind of all that stuff. You've probably all seen it by now, but it's interesting that while that was happening last night, one of the biggest doping stories in the history of England was unfolding. And so Lord Coe, Sir Dave Brailsford, Sir Bradley Wiggins, Team Sky, the IAAF and a bunch of other people are sitting very uncomfortably this morning as they're leafing through their newspapers back and front. It is the main story on all of the UK sports pages, and in particular on the front page of a bunch of newspapers, that effectively Damien Collins, the Tory MP's committee, has found that there was widespread use of the corticosteroid triamcinolone, correctly pronounced?
Yes.
Close enough. By Team Sky, when they didn't actually really have any medical need for it, which completely goes against the ethics of Team Sky. Now, it seems like just about they're going to get away with it from a legal perspective, because technically what they were doing might not have been illegal, although there is some debate about what was in the jiffy bag that time and whether or not, if it was triamcinolone, then they wouldn't actually have had a TUE, at which point, boom, you would have an immediate anti-doping violation. So it's a massive story, and it's a little bit complicated in parts. If you haven't been following up to this point, it has been tricky to follow. But today, when the report is all written down, it's pretty clear that Team Sky, marginal gains is bullshit. There was nothing marginal about going off, taking corticosteroids, losing a bunch of weight and coming back and going, look how skinny I am and yet how powerful I am because I've taken corticosteroids. It's like, well, that's what they do to you. That's why people take them.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of a misunderstanding about how powerful triamcinolone really is and how powerful corticosteroids are, because once you see a TUE and once you see that they can be used for medical purposes, you're like, oh, well, it might just be like a puff of an inhaler. It doesn't exactly do you that much. You don't exactly feel a huge gain of it. Whereas in this report, David Miller is quoted as saying that it is incredible that he would never dare take it at regular intervals because of the power that it gave him in terms of your output. And that has been the key behind Team Sky when we speak to people like Ross Tucker, and he's got mathematical queries about the power output of certain riders. And I guess Bradley Wiggins would have been one of those people. And you've got somebody on the record here in this report like David Miller that says your power to weight ratio is off the charts when you take this sort of stuff.
It's such a powerful drug. It's a once a year drug.
Yes.
And in the report it says that there were 9 ampoules, which is 9 dosages of it taken by Bradley Wiggins in a 3 or 4 year period. So already he's way more taking this more powerful drug than shouldn't actually be used. It's bonkers to use it for asthma. It was what the doctor that the committee brought in to say, oh, so this is an asthma drug, right? He said, what? No.
Well, when a doper is saying that you shouldn't be using it that often, as David Miller has said on the record here, and Bradley Wiggins is going above and beyond what a doper is suggesting you take, then you're in a spot of bother. And that's certainly the case here. But it is the sort of case where it has so completely destroyed Team Sky's image, if there was an image there already, and there is still going to be no legal trouble here. So if Team Sky want to preserve their little echo chamber, they can probably still do that for a while.
I do think the jiffy bag is the thing. So much was made of that story for so long. So the Dr. Freeman is the Team Sky doctor who says that it wasn't actually this powerful corticosteroid that was delivered to Bradley Wiggins after the doping. It was Flumicil, which is a totally legal, over-the-counter decongestant that anybody can take, and it would be totally fine. Now, obviously, they could have walked down the street to buy that as opposed to have somebody deliver this package from a sealed, secure area in their headquarters at British Cycling and brought to wherever it was. They could have just walked down the street and bought it, but they went to this amazing, elaborate delivery system to make sure that nobody knew what was in the package. And they've no records, despite the fact that, marginal gains. They bring their own pillows and duvets and scoop out the lice from the bed bugs in the crappy hotels in the Tour de France that they're meant to stay in. Come on. So not credible on that point. But if it wasn't actually Flumicil, and if it was triamcinolone, then that is a doping violation. That is the team bang to rights, because there's no TUE for that until. Yeah. So, and actually, there's a bit in the report where it says Bradley got sorted. I was just looking it up there before we came on air.
Just while you're looking that up, if that's also the case, it's a double whammy, because you've got Dave Brailsford on the record under parliamentary oath saying it was Flumicil. And that brings its own troubles as well if it turns out not to be Flumicil.
When Shane Sutton gave evidence to the committee, he stated that Dr. Freeman had told him after the end of the race in La Tussauds that he had treated Bradley Wiggins with the medication that was in the package. Don't know what was in the package, of course, but maybe we do. He said that Freeman had told him, Brad's been sorted. So if he was sorted, that would have been sorted immediately after the race, when you're still technically in competition and you need a TUE for that. So so look, it's an unbelievably interesting story at this point, because Team Sky had been held up and is now the most powerful, important team in cycling. They're the ones who were, going to race clean and restore the credibility of the sport, and have on their books at the minute the reigning Tour de France champion, Chris Froome, who of course, has his own issues at the moment too.
Yeah, this is 2012 we're talking about here for the most part, at which point Team Sky get a little bit of a taste of success. We don't know how clean it was done. And then they're like, let's go after more of this. And they get more and more successful, more dominant.
They're amazing, yeah.
So if we've got stuff on the record now that casts anything regarding 2012 into a bit of doubt, then you can imagine what potentially lies out there for 2014 towards all the way to 2017.
Well, it would be amazing that they needed to use these very powerful drugs in the way that they have done to be successful, and then somehow they just managed to become even more successful without this.
Yes,
that is an amazing thing that they've done. Congratulations, Team Sky.
Or maybe marginal gains was something that they were like, actually, you know what? We don't like these corticosteroids. They don't make us feel good. We're going to stop doing this now. We're just going to be successful and get more aerobically dynamic bodysuits or something.
Yeah, and blackcurrant juice, isn't it?
And that'll do the same thing that the corticosteroids have done for the last couple of years.
So we haven't yet talked about Sebastian Coe, who the committee said didn't do enough to actually reveal the extent of the doping issue. There was the IAAF commissioned a survey, a piece of research from a German university that found that a bunch of people had admitted that they doped. They never published that. They refused to publish that. There was also something about biological passports. A bunch of people had suspicious values in their biological passports over a long period of time, and only a third of those athletes' cases were followed up on by the IAAF. Basically, like, nothing to see here, folks. Your biological passport doesn't look so good. Don't worry about it. We don't really care. And then the Nike Oregon project also comes up. So that those bits will start to become more of a focus when something happens with Brailsford. Either he resigns or refuses to resign, or says, I'm going to take you all to court, which isn't going to really happen. Bradley Wiggins has said he's going to answer his case or give his side of the story in the next couple of days. But this doesn't even take into account the time when the testosterone patches were accidentally delivered to British Cycling's headquarters.
Like, we are forgetting that to a certain extent, that arguably one of the most powerful drugs involved in this is kind of just been forgotten about, and rightly so, because it is this huge thing that there is clearly a huge amount of information about, and it's kind of been left hanging out there because there hasn't been a whistleblower in effect to actually tell us what has gone on here, because all this information is based on quite an amount of it is based on the work of Matt Lawton and the Jiffy Bag story, who's going to join us a little bit later on in the show. And it is that leak, it is those whistleblowers, it is the work of journalists, and it is the work of Damien Collins and Fancy Bears. Yes, Fancy Bears
The Russians got it.
Yeah, so the Fancy Bears leak was the
Flumicil, Jiffy Bag, all that kind of stuff. The TUEs. Bradley Wiggins had TUEs in 2011 and 2012.
So if it wasn't for Fancy Bears, there was nothing for the select committee to follow up upon, and it is thanks to to these beautiful Russian people that the UK government could do their job and actually look into this a little bit more, because ultimately there is a dearth of information and there is so much more out there, you can imagine, that we still don't know about and that the Parliamentary Committee will not be able to follow up on. If you said to Dave Brailsford right now, OK, let's call it a quits, let's call full time on this thing, and you can retire, go into the sunset, and nothing more will ever come out, do you think he'd take it? I think he possibly would.
Yeah. Well, I
think we got a taste, and I think there could be a little bit more hiding underneath.
He gets to keep his fancy car and all his money, does he?
Yes. There's no way the tours get stripped now. Do you really think the UCI will turn around and be like, no, we're stripping you of all of this? Of course not. We're not even close to that level.
No, because, they have admitted it's unethical, but they think it was legal. So, yeah. Right, look, let's move on. OTB AM is brought to you this morning by our friends at Air. Time for the papers. Yeah, we're going to look.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.
Bit premature there from Owen.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just so eager to get into these back pages. Arsenal is the other story that's dominating outside of the Team Sky story this morning, really. And on the back of the Irish Independent, we've got Houghton stands tall as Wenger empire crumbles. That's a picture there of Arsene Wenger with his head in his hands almost as Chris Houghton masterminded a 2-1 victory against Arsenal yesterday. The front of the Irish Examiner then goes with one of the quotes that seems to be getting a lot of traction this morning. Naked Gunners reads the headline. Wenger says, when you are naked completely, you have to try and find a shirt and get dressed properly again. His sort of...
So he gave everybody, because they're not the only newspaper to go with the naked gun, naked gunners pun. I mean, maybe the Examiner didn't get the naked gun reference.
Well, I presume they did and just added Nurs onto the end of it to align themselves with Arsenal's club's nickname there, Ger. I presume that's what they tried to do. If they missed the naked gun pun, then really that's your career up as a sub-editor, to be honest. Road getting rockier for Wenger after Brighton lost reads the back of the Racing Post, which is certainly true. And on the back of the Mirror this morning, Pants reads a very snappy headline. Broken Gunners are, pants. It's 4 defeats in a row, and Wenger does a Cantona, saying his dire flops feel like they've lost their trousers. On the back of the Herald then this morning.
What's the Cantona reference? If he's French, they don't really understand him. Is that it? Is that what this is about?
Yeah, I don't think... Did Eric Cantona ever make any reference to trousers?
Potentially, I don't know. I mean,
I'm quite sure.
Obviously, the famous one is the seagulls follow the trawler a bit, but...
Wenger is clinging on, reads the back of the Herald. Gunners boss closer to exit as City power on towards title. At the back of the Sun, meanwhile, then, it's that pun again. Naked guns. Wenger's exposed as Koscielny says boss must share the blame.
That's better, right? Naked guns. I mean, it's more closely aligned with the actual...
Maybe the both editors were on the phone to each other and they're like, you go naked guns, we'll go naked gunners.
Wigan facing new claims over doping is the Telegraph. The Telegraph didn't carry any Bradley Wiggins on their front page of their UK edition. Then fans demand Wenger exit is the story on that one. The Sport Monday in the Irish Times is Bannister's death passes him into running immortality. Roger Bannister went to work the morning that he broke the 4-minute mile barrier and seems to have been like one of these people who just ran because he could and liked it, as opposed to running for personal gain, and then didn't use his fame and celebrity to cash in and become rich. Had an other and completely different, brilliant life after that, and seems like, generally a pretty decent guy all around. Furlong most serious Ireland concern. Gavin Cumsky has that story on the front of the Irish Times, which is in keeping with what we expected basically when Andy Dunn was in the studio, and he's a physio and kind of knows this stuff about the length of time that it would take to recover from a hamstring injury. So anyway, 3 and Easy Records want to track Pep with title in sight. Koscielny was still back Wenger. I mean, Lauren Koscielny's not going to come out and say anything otherwise. And then Robbie's the boss in India, a story from Mark McAdam. We'll talk about that with Dan McDonnell, who's coming in about 5 minutes' time. And then no sport on the front there. So the Irish Daily Mail, the UK Daily Mail has Bradley Wiggins on the front page with the same headline. Wiggins did take drug to win tour. It's hard to come back from that when you're selling Skodas in the ad breaks and everybody's like, oh, that's that guy, he took drugs to win the tour. Yeah, but it was legal, he had a TUE for it. Well, but it was a drug, right?
I really hope that this is like kind of a very expensive stunt from Skoda, that they came up with the tagline powered by something different for this exact moment, and they're rubbing their hands. They're like, we've really landed themselves in at this time.
Probably, I mean, they can read. They've seen the select committee hearings.
Yeah, I'd like to think that it was all just a deep ploy by them, and well done if that was the case.
The Times journalists are out today. This is the Times Ireland edition, but obviously Wiggins accused by MPs. Tour de France winner took banned substance to enhance performance, report says, and inside it, Matt Dickinson is just going for him, saying it's absolutely time for for Brailsford to go, which, you know, obviously the Times has the same ownership as Team Sky, so or at least as the main sponsors, and then every scintilla of credibility is gone. After inquiry finds Wiggins abused anti-doping system to win the Tour. Can Team Sky continue? This is The Guardian and their front page. Wiggins and Sky abused doping rules to win Tour. So you've got to understand that this is like a national hero. He's the most decorated Olympian in British athletics, cycling, track and field ever. Like, even the rowers didn't win as many medals as Sir Bradley Wiggins. And then, out of nowhere, really, he started to get really good and win races. And then he won the Tour de France for the very first time as a Brit. It was like, wow, look what we can do. There's nothing we can't do. When we put millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of pounds behind something, we get really good at it. Team GB, go cycling. This is amazing. Look, we all feel great about ourselves. And then, you know, Brexit happens. And
just one other thing to point out from inside The Guardian as well, and it's kind of in line with Matt Dickinson there, but William Fotheringham, who would have covered the Tour for, I'd say, close to 30 years at this point. I know last year was his final Tour, but naturally, once you've been covering cycling for 25 years and then suddenly a Brit wins a Tour de France, there is a tendency to become something of a cheerleader, and he certainly would have been defending Team Sky. He's another one who's certainly hopped to the other end of the fence here. And when I mentioned that echo chamber a little bit earlier on, the number of people in that echo chamber is lessening by the minute now when you've got somebody like Fotheringham coming out and saying that it is time for Dave Brailsford to retire. It's a big moment for sure, and you just suspect, is there an element of people kind of cashing in now, kind of saying, right, this is the point of no return?
But look, however people get aboard the train, that is like, we need to see incredible evidence and proof that you are clean when you've done these incredible things. However people get there, I'm not going to criticise them for getting there late. It's hard not to get carried away with nationalism and the joy of, here are people who live and walk amongst us doing great things, and that's what sport's supposed to give us. So it's hard to give up on that dream, but ultimately this is so it's not Lance Armstrong because he wasn't a bully, but like, look at what they've done. Their achievements are almost of a similar scale. You add Wiggins' Tour de France to the Froome ones. Here's Bradley Wiggins' tweet. I find it so sad. I mean, come on. Is he not reading any of Trump's tweets? I find it so sad that accusations can be made where people can be accused of things they have never done, which are then regarded as facts, fake news. I strongly refute the claim that any drug was used without medical need. I hope to have my say in the next few days and put my side across. Why didn't you say it last night, Bradley? Why didn't you just do it on Twitter, record a video, and then just go and do interviews and then hold a press conference? If you're clean, you're clean, but go and hold a press conference. But come on, channeling your inner Donald Trump. What are you doing? Who's advising these people?
Poor Bradley getting absolutely screwed over by Dr. Richard Freeman, whose lost laptop would obviously have shown Bradley Wiggins to be clean, whiter than white.
Yeah. So the Freeman thing is really interesting. We'll get into this a little bit later on. He is apparently bullied by Shane Sutton, the coach, not Shane Stapleton, the hurler, and our colleague. He was not bullied by Shane Stapleton, by Shane Sutton, into giving TUEs. And so that's one of the other accusations. So there's a bunch of stuff here that Team Sky are going to have to answer into the future, and the Brailsford is going to have to answer into the future. And that sets us up for Mark 2 of the inquiry. So that's what's in the newspaper. We'll come back to them a little bit later on. We're going to get Dan McDonnell in now, but before we do, we're going to play a little bit of this. Dushin Langan speaking in the aftermath of the Last Man Standing tournament held at the National Stadium on Saturday night. Amazing tournament, knockdowns, knockouts, an outsider with the victory. So Roy Sheehan wins, right? And we've had Eric Donovan in studio a good bit over the last while talking about his career. Roy and Eric live on the same street and have boxed together for Ireland. And so like they've seen their careers reach peaks boxing for Ireland. And there was always a sense that neither of them quite fully reached their full potential, and that Eric is now kind of getting to a point where potentially he might have a European title fight. It turns out Roy Sheehan was on building sites and came off them about 2 months ago, and then picked up 25 grand in cash on Saturday night, and another 5 grand for the St Michael's Boxing Club in Athy, which is just absolutely brilliant for them and much needed funds for a club that does incredible work. So anyway, here he is speaking with Oisín in the aftermath of victory.
How important is this win? What does this do for you regards staying in boxing, staying as a pro?
Well, I have to sit down and I have to talk to people. Not only talk to people in the pro boxing, I have to talk to my boss, Dan Curtis, you know. Because I left 6 or 7 weeks ago and I said I was coming back to work, you know. He's going to be down a lad. I don't know. I think I have more to show in this pro game. I have to be shown there tonight. I'm after boxing 2 lads there, 9 and 10 and 0. They're boxing the last few years. I have an Irish title fight. Well, I don't know when I have an Irish title fight because I have to do a few 6 rounders, 8 rounders. I can't jump into straight on, but who knows after that, European level, I don't know.
And at your age, do you have to kind of hurry it along a bit?
Yes, I don't want no easy fights now, no journeyman, nothing like that. I'm 33. There's big names out there, especially in Ireland, in the middleweights. There's very big names. I don't mind fighting anybody. I'm 33, as I said. I don't want to be fighting a journeyman or like that. I want to be up there and see how far I can go. And I'll see how far I go, and that's it then, you know what I mean?
But what does this kind of win do for you at that big profile, live on terrestrial TV victory like this? I mean, boxing hasn't been shown on terrestrial TV. A professional Irish card hasn't been shown, I don't think, since 2011. A lot of people watching tonight, a lot of people talking about you, a lot of people are glad to see you back. What does this do for you?
Yeah, it's brilliant, you know. Boxing on live television, and everyone around Ireland can see it. And not only Ireland, I know this is going around the world because this last man standing is going to be all over the world now. But hopefully a few people out there can help me on my journey and probably get a few sponsors, as it is hard as a pro. It's hard to get money to travel up and down. It's hard to live. It's hard. You have to buy your own food, your own clothes, your own equipment, everything. You have to pay managers, gyms, everything. Do you know, if there's anybody out there and willing to help me, thank you very much.
And just before I let you go, the kind of nature of tonight's win, granted 3 fights over, I think it was 10 rounds in the end because you didn't go the full distance. Well, you didn't let your man go the full distance in the last one. Does that give you the confidence to know that if you need to, you can do the 10 and 12 round thing? Because that's something you haven't done in your career up to now, up to recently.
No, well, in amateur you do the 3-minute rounds, but in the gym the last few weeks I've been doing the criteria that's here, the 3 minutes, out for 10 minutes, back in for 3.
12 rounds won't be a problem for you.
No, I do it with my ease, and you know what I mean, I have a cup of tea and go back in doing number 12, no problem.
Roy, well done tonight. Go and enjoy this one, and best of luck in your upcoming Irish title fight. Roy Sheehan, Ireland's first ever last man standing, speaking to us in a quiet corner of the National Stadium.
Yeah, good stuff, Roy. Best of luck with the sponsors. Right, Dan, good morning to you. How you doing?
Morning, guys. How are things?
Let's move on to football, which hasn't quite got the headlines this morning. It's got some of the headlines, obviously. We'll talk about
other things going on. Yeah, there's a bit of Martin Glenn stuff as well, you know. So there's been a few stories.
There's a few stories knocking around. Yeah. We will talk about Arsenal in a minute. We'll get Andrew Mangan of Arseblog on too. But I want to talk City-Chelsea a little bit first. It's not boring what City are doing, but they have reduced this to like a Michael Schumacher style, Tiger Woods in his pomp, dominance of other opponents who you think, oh, maybe something today might happen, but it just never does.
Yeah, I think if you were watching the game yesterday and if your mind wasn't wandering a bit during the second half, it's sort of forgivable. So to start thinking about other things you could or should be doing, maybe. You know, it was really strange, just that type of game. I mean, I was actually sort of flicking over a small bit between that and the Barcelona Atletico Madrid, which is sort of overlapping a small bit. You know, and it was a 1-0. Home win as well for the dominant side, although it's much closer. And at least with Atletico, they gave it a bit of a go.
Yeah.
You know, and there was a sense they had a late disallowed goal and so on. You know, they were a team with a plan that, you know, sort of broke forward and tried to get something from the game. Whereas Chelsea, I think we've all seen the clip at this point of, you know, Fabregas walking, I think, with 20 minutes to go in the game, and that just summed it up. It was going through the motions. Even some of the late substitutions, just bringing on Morata for a minute or two at the end, probably taking off Hazard off to almost prove a point or something. It was a team that was completely beaten, and just for last year's champions to be that lethargic and that limited, it was pretty dull, you know, and I don't know, I still love watching City at times because of just how they can sort of play. But even you even think a couple of weeks ago, okay, very different type of game and so on. But even Wigan in the Cup against City, there was a sense of a plan about what they were doing and how they stuck in the game, but then they were a bit more they made a couple of changes that were clearly part of a prescribed plan. Chelsea wasn't anything like that at all, really. It was very disappointingly flat.
Like when you mentioned your mind wandering, my mind was wandering towards next season already in that second half, and you start to think that City are going to get better. Like Leroy Sané has started to become arguably their best player in the second half of the season. Like you look at Laporte at the heart of the defence, who's obviously improved their team drastically since coming in as well, and the obvious one is Alexander Zinchenko, who's come into the side so seamlessly, and you start to think, God, this team are not going anywhere for a long time.
No, and Bernardo Silva as well, the other one who's sort of grown into the team, I think, and Sané's terrific. Yeah, they know what they're doing, and they just seem to be able to interchange. That they've had Sterling, missing out for a couple of games, and they've been fine, in terms of their ability to just interact and rotate. And obviously they're missing David Silva for a while. They did miss him, but still he's slotted back in. Yeah, you're kind of wondering where it's going to come from in terms of the challenge from elsewhere. I know we probably sometimes towards the end of every season you can reach that conclusion. Maybe if we were talking about Chelsea like 12 months ago, we would have been speaking about Conte, and they finally got this manager who's, he's the right man for the club at this point, or whatever the language might have been at that stage. But
at least with Chelsea, you can trust themselves to shoot their own foot off. With Man City now, the only real threat is if Pep decides I had enough or I'm burnt out. But he doesn't look like the stressed Pep that there was, who was getting wound up by Mourinho at the end of days, at the end of his Barcelona era. He seems like a more mature, calmer, happier, richer man.
Contented, yeah. The one thing is, though, City still haven't put that, those back-to-back years together. I mean, okay, I know it's a slightly different group of players, but they still have this year-on, year-off thing, about them in terms of their previous title wins, and you just assume it's going to be different with sort of, with Pep maybe than it was with Mancini, and who obviously lost the players, and then Pellegrini maybe wasn't as strong, but they still had that Chelsea-like quality to go missing the season after for a period of time. Now, again, they've overhauled the dressing room a fair bit from that time, and we assume it's not going to be that way because they've been building towards something, but it's maybe not, like, it's still a question they have to answer. You have to defend. They say it's the hardest thing, but they're definitely the implosion. It's hard to see where it's going to stem from. It's not as if they're necessarily reliant on a core of senior players who are just coming towards the end and can go off a cliff very quickly.
They have a bunch of kids who are
and even the integration, as you mentioned, Zinchenko, and they still have this superb academy team that we've heard a lot about, that they still have to come through, but even the way in which they're filtering them in slowly but surely might be more coherent than the Chelsea way, where you'd have all these young players who then head off on loan and never quite got there. So you can't declare it over just yet in terms of the next couple of years. I think there's still a bit that, there's a bit of a question mark there, but they're looking very slick at the moment, and it's hard it's hard to look anywhere else when you're thinking about next season right now.
Or who even might be able to sustain a challenge like the 18-point gap. I saw a tweet that Pep's turned this into the SPL, and it's like, I mean, a little bit. It does feel a little bit
but
like
in
that.
One season, though, I know it is. It definitely feels like that, and I mean, the rest of the season is a write-off from the perspective of, there's going to be a top four race of sorts, although, I mean, we'll talk Arsenal in a minute. They're dropping out of that, so it's a sort of a, there's maybe one place up for grabs there.
Is Mourinho going to build a team that can match this stride for stride? Maybe Liverpool can get some consistency if they get a goalkeeper who has the impact that Ederson has had on that defence. It's hard.
Karius done okay on Saturday, but it's you would imagine that Manchester United should be best placed because they've been spending a lot of money, and if Mourinho was talking about not getting enough money, and then he's going to look for some more. So it's the natural contender, but do you fancy him really to they're a good way off in terms of really being as impressive and as fluid as City are.
In the meantime, people should enjoy City. They're playing football at a level as a team and as a club that we haven't really seen that often in the Premier League. Yeah,
it's great to watch. It's probably better to watch when a team tries to play against them, though. Yeah. I mean, they're going to just find teams increasingly, as if they're not already, but even more so, just sitting in that bit more, and then the games can become a little bit more difficult to watch. I mean, Arsenal were just so open on Thursday, and even the last two games that you get to see City break in with their space, and you see how electric and how good they can be. Yeah. Not every side they play is going to be that sort of compliant, and that might be the slight obstacle to entertainment if teams just realise we cannot beat these let's just walk around them for a while.
Let's move on to Arsenal. Andrew Mangan, good morning to you. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks, Ger. How are you?
Yeah. You've managed to put some sense of perspective on what's going on at Arsenal at the moment.
That's a good question. It's difficult, isn't it? It's an unprecedented situation, certainly over the last 20 years or so, to see a club so very clearly in crisis is a word that's overused a bit, isn't it? But I think we're pretty much there when it comes to Arsenal and what's happening on the pitch. 8 defeats in 2018 alone, 8 defeats in the league away from home this season. A team that look absolutely shorn of any confidence, and the manager just doesn't appear to be able to turn it around.
Here's the thing, this was unbelievably predictable because it kind of happened most of the last 4 or 5 seasons. There's been a cup run here and there to help them get through it, or there's been late qualification from the group stages of the Champions League to get to a point where ultimately something bad happens, like the back-to-back City defeats, and that humiliation comes around this time of the year every year for the last number of years. So what's the way out here?
A new manager. I think that's the only way that things are going to change in any significant way. It's overdue, I think. And I'm not one to downplay the fact that Arsene Wenger won 3 FA Cups, because I was at all of those finals and had a great time, and it's brilliant to see your club win. But, you look at where Arsenal were, and they used to challenge for the title, and then they were always firmly ensconced in the top 4, and then they had to struggle and fight to get into the top 4. Last season fell out of the top 4, and now we're sitting in a position where we're 13 points away from 4th place, 33 points behind the leaders. The decline is steady and slow and obvious to everybody, and it really feels like the club needs to go in a different direction in terms of how it does its business, in terms of how it operates, and in terms of the way it's managed. And I think until that decision is made, it's going to be a struggle, and that includes what's coming up in Europe in the Europa League against Milan. Maybe that could be the final nail, but you just don't know with this club. They seem quite happy to just amble along.
Andrew, do you reckon that it's too late at this point for this whole saving face of Arsene Wenger? Because there was certainly a sense at the end of last season that had he left after that FA Cup win, there might have been kind of this twee sense of he was a great manager and things ended on a relatively good note. Whereas it seems after what's happened over the last 7 days or so that opportunity is long gone.
Maybe. I think when things are as bad as they are, there's a sort of burning sense of frustration. It's hard to look beyond that. And in time, I think people will look back at what Arsene Wenger did at Arsenal and remember him as a great manager and a great man, and somebody who did a lot, not just for Arsenal, but for English football. Right now, it's difficult to look beyond that frustration. I do wonder as well if perhaps his decision, or the decision to keep him on after the FA Cup win against Chelsea, was because the club really weren't ready for any kind of change when it comes to the manager. And what we've seen this season is they've appointed a head of recruitment. They've appointed a guy who is, for all intents and purposes, a director of football, even though he's not allowed to be called a director of football. So they're putting in place these structures which will enable them to make the change and to perhaps modernize the way that the club is managed. You bring in a head coach rather than this kind of legacy manager who wants to do every single thing at a club the way Wenger has done. So I wonder if maybe there was just a little bit of sacrifice, is not the right word, but maybe he was convinced to stay on for the good of the club, even if maybe he thought it might not have been the best thing.
And so maybe that 2-year deal was actually really a 1-year deal, and everybody knows it's coming to the end this summer. Well, that would make sense, and like the payoff would be like, your thanks very much, here's a year's free salary, go off and earn whatever you want anywhere else. The only counter argument to all of this is, and I'm looking at the Forbes list here, and I just wanted to check, Arsenal went from 7th in 2016 to 6th in 2017. So the results on the field mattered a bit, but not that much when it actually came to their earning power, and that makes them the 6th richest club in the world. If you're Stan Kroenke, you're sitting in your office in LA going, well, my American football team is great, and I'm looking at all the money I'm making in London and thinking, why would I change things?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, but I think Kroenke is ultimately the man with the responsibility. People talk about Wenger and say he should walk away. Managers don't walk away, really, do they? When was the last time you can think of a manager who said, oh, actually, I'm not good enough, I'm going to resign? they get sacked or they come to a mutual agreement to leave. And I think Kroenke is the one who has that responsibility, because if you look at the game against Manchester City last week in the Premier League, and the Emirates Stadium was maybe half full, and people said, well, it was bad weather, it was a bit snowy, it was a bit cold. If that had been Arsenal and Manchester City playing first and second with a couple of points difference between the two teams, that stadium would have been full. And that's the reality. The reality that Stan Kroenke needs to look at is that people are not going to matches where they bought the tickets. I mean, they announced the attendance at the game, and they do this thing at Arsenal where they announce the amount of tickets that have been sold. So in a half-empty stadium, they talk about tonight's attendance is 58,000 and it's ludicrous.
Yeah,
it's absolutely ludicrous. That's the reality he needs to look at, is that fans are apathetic. They're frustrated. They're not bothering to turn up. They're spending their money now, but they won't renew their season tickets. And there is obviously a season ticket waiting list. But again, a lot of what Arsenal do and wanted to do when it came to the Emirates Stadium is have this big corporate culture. So, big Champions League nights, you're selling all your corporate boxes. How many corporate boxes are you going to sell to blue chip clients when you're playing Östersunds in the Europa League and getting beaten at home? That's what he needs to look at.
Jogi Löw is the latest name I've seen linked with the position. If there's a wish list, if there's like a top 3 or 4 that you've looked at, is Diego Simeone number one? Like, who are you thinking that actually can come in here and be that manager that works in that structure and is successful?
That's a really good question. I mean, I don't think Jogi Löw is the guy. He hasn't managed a club since 2004, and even then his club record was not great. I mean, he might do well with the German influence at the club. I have to say the shortlist that was doing the rounds during the week was pretty unconvincing. Brendan Rodgers, no thank you. Jardim from Monaco obviously is a good candidate and somebody who's had a lot of success at Monaco. I don't see Simeone being in any way on Arsenal's shortlist. I think there's a culture at the club that would see them run a million miles from somebody with that kind of character. I could imagine Diego Simeone smashing some heads in the Arsenal boardroom, and they wouldn't fancy that at all. There's other names like Carlo Ancelotti out there as well. Maybe they're going to go for an old player, Patrick Vieira, Mikel Arteta. You just don't know. When you look at the inability of Arsenal to make big decisions, it doesn't fill you with a great deal of confidence as to how they're going to make the biggest decision in the last number of years.
Just on that point on Simeone, it's an interesting one because you think of Wenger, and one of the most used adjectives about Wenger is stubborn, that he's constantly described as stubborn. But clearly, as you've outlined there, behind the scenes, he must be the exact opposite of stubborn. He must be the most placid man to deal with, because the board seem to tolerate him and these results to such an extent that they seem to be delighted with him.
Well, I don't know that speaks to a lack of stubbornness. Certainly, he's a man who believes in himself, as most top-level managers do. There's an ego to them. There's a self-belief, a confidence. And they, I suppose, down the years have backed him fully to the hilt. They've always backed him, and maybe that's playing a part in what's going on at this moment in time, that they don't want to backtrack on a decision that might reflect badly on them. I mean, I think what's worrying is that yesterday at Brighton there wasn't a single Arsenal board member at the game. Usually it's traditional for the chief executive or a couple of board members to be at the game. When things go badly for Arsenal, the chief executive hides and disappears. We don't hear anything from Ivan Gazidis. We don't hear anything from Stan Kroenke. And what they are is they hide behind Arsene Wenger. They know that he is the brunt of the frustration, that he will be front and center. He goes to the press conferences. He does the media work. He's the guy who's taken all the bullets for them. And I think it suits them, because otherwise they might have to be responsible for some part of what's going on.
Andrew, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning, and I'm sorry for your trouble.
Pleasure, guys. We'll catch you soon.
Andrew Mangan of Arsblog there. Check out Arsblog. Follow it on its various platforms. Leo Messi scored his 600th goal in that game against Atletico. It was a free kick, and they're showing highlight reels of like who's given him the most assists, and 82 goals in the 2011-2012 season. I'd somehow forgotten this.
It's sort of like a glitch in a computer game you play when you were younger, where someone scores that amount of goals. And even now, like the goal. I mean, there's a free kick yesterday. There's a free kick he scored during the week in the game that they drew Las Palmas, and they win the free kick at the edge of the box yesterday. And all the discussion is, it's in a similar area. You know, what's going to happen? And he just lives up to it every time. He just steps up and pops it in the top corner, and it's just routine.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like a penalty now.
It's just routine. But you know, it's strange though that we analysed the it's a different. You're chasing the game, but you know, Chelsea yesterday, you know, Fabregas walking, you know, and that's obviously because you want a bit of energy and so on. But like you watch Messi at times, and he just walks around the pitch, ambles around, but just has that unbelievable sense of time and just to ignite when the moment demands it. And I just was watching the game yesterday thinking we're going to really just in 5-10 years time appreciate what we had here, just the ability to be able to watch him on TV a couple of times a week, and a couple of times I've seen him in the flesh. It is a wonderful thing, and it's sort of something everyone should try and do at some stage over the next couple of years.
Yeah,
definitely. Get to a game somehow if you can.
Get to Barcelona, make sure he's going to be playing probably like a Champions League game to guarantee that they actually pick him.
But he plays so many games as well, though. I mean, even some of the Copa del Rey games and stuff, he's stepped out of a couple of them. But you know, and I think Graham was actually speaking about fatigue being a slight concern for Barca because they've had a lot of games recently, and you can see it a bit. But still, it's a joy to watch.
I wonder in 5-10 years will we just regret getting caught up in Messi versus Ronaldo, and we're
Maybe.
like, what were we doing? We should have just been sitting here appreciating both. Why did we have this stupid discussion?
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe, I don't know, if Ronaldo wasn't around, would we be having bigger debates about Messi's ability? Is he just in a bad era? I don't know. Yeah. I think we just loved a bit of rivalry. At least he has some kind of contemporary, some peer. I mean, the Ballon d'Ors are still going neck and neck there, I think.
I think is Ronaldo ahead?
It might be, actually, yeah.
I mean, not that I pay that much attention, but I think...
No, I mean, we were sort of getting sucked into it there.
And they're pretty close to being level in terms of European Cups. You do feel like when the Messi career is over, Barcelona will be like, he should have won a few more European Cups. We had Leo Messi on our team. What the hell were we doing?
Yeah, and there's a small matter of a World Cup, I guess, this summer.
Yeah,
which is
he'll fix that, surely. Listen, we've got to just go back about the Arsenal thing, right? Like, I hear this, Simeone wants to go to Italy. I'm like, you drive a truck of cash to his house and you say, there's one of these every month for you, whatever the price, you come and you turn our club, which is world famous, into one of the biggest and best football teams of all time. We'll back you, whatever it takes. Like, you test his resolve. This, he only wants to manage teams he's played for or whatever. Just give him the money.
Yeah,
tempt him.
You would think you at least try, and you would think being, you know, as a powerful club in London is a huge selling point. But I mean, what Andrew said there is interesting. He'd obviously be well versed on the sort of the boardroom manoeuvrings and what type of manager suits them. Certainly, the Arteta chat seems to be going around during the week, and sort of the, you know, some of the more informed lads covering that beat that the Arteta name is doing the rounds. And sometimes when one club is setting the standards, then do you try and look to them in some way and what they're doing? And that's the type of appointment you go for. Arteta, well, we need some kind of response. Well, he's influential. It's you know, that's the way you go, maybe.
City has spent $1 billion.
There is a slight issue there.
I mean, if we're going to spend the same money, that's fine. But two other things we need to talk about. Sean Maguire back with a bang at the weekend at Preston. Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider he's been off for 4 months, at his first game back, he comes on, and significant things since he's been injured. They sold Jordan Hugel, who was their main central striker. So when Maguire went over and did really well in the autumn, he was actually playing wide of a front sort of three, and he scored, I think, 4 or 5 goals, but he wasn't playing through the middle where he really wanted to be playing. And now he has the opportunity to go there and play there. And the 2 goals he got weren't great goals, but they were good strikers' goals in terms of just poaching around the area. And it's an exciting time for him. They got a chance in the playoffs, and there's an Ireland squad being named this week where he could now really pitch to play that role. So it was fantastic, really great to see.
And Robbie Keane also might be available for selection.
Robbie Keane kicking off his managerial career with a goal from Robbie Keane. Now, look, it was to avoid bottom place in the Indian Premier League, so it's maybe not high stakes stuff, but it's interesting. I mean, Robbie will go down that route, I think, in the long run. He may not always have a Robbie Keane to pick to help things along the way, but I think they have a little Super Cup competition or something still to come there, so he'll get a few more games to learn a bit more about it.
Is there a limited number of games in he can do. You can only do 3 or 4. There's his Instagram there.
Yeah, their season is over, the regular season, but there is
that his tattoo in the background? Is that, for some reason I have weren't there wings in one of his tattoos?
I'm not sure.
Or is that the name of, is that the...
I assume this is some
team?
kind of official club branded paraphernalia in some way. I don't know. I'm not entirely
including
sure.
the shamrock there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, maybe it is. Yeah.
I look forward to the challenge and responsibilities for our last game tonight. I want to wish everyone best of luck, Shamrock.
Suit on. Yeah, so it's a more managerial look.
Yeah.
But I think he's a few more games there now. And away from the spotlight, I think, is points and he can learn a bit about how it all works.
It's definitely off Broadway. This is not like, I want to manage in the Premier League. This is not that.
No, and it's actually quite. It's kind of hard to find sort of the proper streams and the footage, and I don't even know press-wise what sort of attention he's really getting out there. And the club has been a bit of a basket case this season. They've actually had a really bad year, but. We shall see. I think that is definitely going to be his future, and I think he'll be back in Irish football at some stage. And this is maybe a sort of a pressure-free-ish environment. Might be the best way to get your feet under the table a bit and just learn how it all works. But I think there's a short-term shelf life on the Indian thing. It's what happens really in a month or 2 months' time is going to be very interesting.
I mean, if you're the manager or the owner of a championship team or a League One team and you want a high-profile manager to come in, it's not beyond the bounds possibility that he gets a chance there.
No, I suppose there comes a point though where you stop playing and you speak to people who've got into management young that were playing. They just say you need to stop the playing, and I think Robbie, there's still a sense he still wants to play for that bit more time. So he had a few injuries this year, a bit of an interrupted season. So maybe that might be the tipping point, and he realises he needs to go that way. But it might be one more year at him somewhere else first.
All right, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. The Keith Andrews show fell victim to the snow last Thursday. It is back this Thursday at 12:30 on YouTube and Facebook and Periscope, and you can find it on the Off the Ball Football Show podcast stream as well. Here's a snippet from his chat with Stephen Kelly about his future.
Body feels good.
Yeah, body feels
Steve
good.
Bruce has been on record as well as saying, take him. I've just got too many right backs in my squad. So, why hasn't it happened?
I don't know. Yeah, it's a strange one. Like, I suppose I feel like a bit of a pariah at the moment. I feel like it's just a weird one. And I suppose as far as football goes, I've always had a very good reputation as I've got on well. My manager is a good pro. Yeah, worked hard, and so it's frustrating in that sense. I don't understand why it hasn't happened yet, but I know you got to keep going, and if nothing happens in the next couple of months, then I suppose I reassess and make a decision. And like I said, I've got a few fingers, a few different things, and on trying different avenues as you do to prepare for when you do actually retire. You want to have yourself set up so that you've got something that can. Well, obviously, nothing's going to replace it, but you want something to be able to take over for that. And obviously, I'm a big family man. Like, it's been actually amazing spending time with my wife Helga, Hugo, and then I've obviously welcomed the new little girl to the world, Harlow. 4 months. She's 4 months today, actually. So, and that has been. With her just being born, it's come as an amazing time. So that's been a huge distraction. So I've been able to train and then have weekends with them, and it's just been I've not been travelling away to games or away with Ireland and stuff. So that's kind of been, as much as I've missed the football side of it, that part of it has been amazing, and to have that much time with my family has just been, at this stage in their lives when they're so young, has been so crucial, and I feel very blessed to be able to do that. But I still have that hunger to want to play, so it's kind of catch-50 thing, I suppose.
Stephen Kelly speaking there with the lads on the Keith Andrews Show, which is coming your way again this Thursday from 12:30 on all our social channels. You should subscribe on youtube.com/off the ball, and we'll give you notifications whenever anything goes live so you don't miss it into the future. And if you like to cast your stuff on your phone to your TV, then it's pretty easy to do that from YouTube or from anybody's smartphone these days.
Is it? Really? Do that these days?
You can. Right, let's very briefly run you through these newspaper headlines before we get into the big story, which is dominating the UK and most of the sports pages today. Wiggins and Sky abused doping rules to win Tour, says The Guardian. Every scintilla of credibility is gone after inquiry finds Wiggins abused anti-doping system to win the Tour. Can Team Sky continue? Wiggins accused by MPs is the back on the Times Ireland edition. And I guess more importantly here from our perspective, it's the Mail. Wiggins did take drug to win Tour. That's the story from Matt Lawton, and we may as well actually just say good morning to Matt Lawton because he's on the phone now. Matt, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, this report and these stories have been so long in gestation that I guess anybody who's been covering it in the way that you have, this is a moment that you knew was coming, but it's always good to see it down in cold black and white print from the select committee that your story was right all along and now has been vindicated to the high heavens, effectively.
Yeah, it does feel a bit like that, and also the stories on Coe and Farrell, which I've covered. They've managed to wrap up 2 years of my life in 52 pages. So, there is a sense of vindication, but I guess we need to see what happens now. We need to see what impact this has on Sky, if it has any kind of impact on Brailsford. I'm not convinced it will do. There's a sort of, I don't know. There's a lot of heads being buried in sand, it feels to me. But we'll see what happens.
I guess the other thing is that it doesn't feel like an end. It feels like this is a midpoint here, because there's the investigation into the testosterone patches.
Yeah.
There's the fact that a couple of key witnesses haven't really fully been interviewed properly. Dr. Freeman in particular, I'm thinking of in that one. And then there's just a few bits of evidence that have now been written down for the very first time that once you start to unpack them, you think, oh, hang on a second. If Bradley was sorted, as it says here, did his TUE apply or did he not need a TUE? Maybe that wasn't Flumacil in the jiffy bag after all.
Yeah, I certainly don't think it's the end. You're absolutely right. The GMC investigation into Freeman and the testosterone patches, I think, is massive. And you always think there's going to be a tipping point. You know, I must admit, when I first wrote about Brailsford's attempts to kill the jiffy bag story, I kind of thought that might be the tipping point, but it wasn't. And then other things have happened. Chris Froome's failed drugs test, you think, is at the tipping point? Not yet, but I do wonder if he actually does get banned, whether that becomes a tipping point. But the testosterone patches story, you probably saw last week, I did a story of, we believe that the GMC have obtained some further evidence on that, which could be extremely significant. So, you look at Dave Brailsford and the blows keep coming in, and the image of the team keeps getting damaged, and you just wonder when Sky, Sky Corporate, Sky the company, say enough is enough, when the people like Jeremy Darroch and James Murdoch say we can't take any more of this, or when the sponsors who pump all this money in to run this team say we can't take any more of this. It's I think I read a piece in The Guardian this morning saying there's no credibility left, and I think that's the tone of pieces I've read in the Times, on our pages. You just wonder how they keep going, but they haven't. If they deserve any lasting aberration, it's their kind of, it's the thickness of their hide, if you like. They are amazingly resilient.
The remarkable thing about the whole Wigan story has been this kind of onus that's been placed on Dr. Richard Freeman, and potentially he's been happy to take that flack, that it's like, oh, look at this doctor who couldn't keep records on his computer, which ended up getting stolen anyway, and that's the reason why this has become a total mess. And they have this whistleblower that's unnamed in the report this morning saying that Dave Brailsford and Shane Sutton put more pressure on Freeman to provide more proactive medical support, which is the first thing we have on the record, really, isn't it, Matt, of Brailsford and Sutton pressurising Freeman and backing him into corners, potentially?
Yeah. We do, although on the record from an anonymous whistleblower. And it's funny, I read that, and I actually don't know who that is. And I think I'm pretty across this story, but I don't know who the whistleblower is. I've got an idea, but I don't know. The idea that they didn't know what the doctors were doing, and it was all, the way that sort of Brailsford tried to present it in Parliament all those months ago is slightly difficult to believe. I actually think the biggest thing in that report is the admission by Sutton that the use of triamcinolone was unethical. I thought that was the absolute standout quote of the whole report. I thought it was incredible, and from what I understand, people at Sky are shaken by that, because what you have the man who masterminded Wigan's success, coaxed him to that tour title, took him from a guy that was going out the back door and finished 24th in his first year at Sky and won it in 2012. And he's also Brailsford's right-hand man. You know, that nothing happened at Team Sky without those two people knowing. And one of them has broken ranks talking to the committee and has admitted that it was unethical. And I actually think, you know, Wiggins put out his statement last night. He will not be able to escape what his coach and mentor has said. Read the Wiggins book in 2012, My Time. Shane Sutton is a central player in the story. He is someone that Wiggins describes as absolutely crucial to his success. And he is now conceding that, yes, it is unethical. It might not have broken any wider rules technically, but it's unethical. And given that the ethics of the team is kind of central to their image, central to what they're supposed to be about, central to the dream that Brailsford sold everybody in 2010, I think that kills them. I don't think they can escape that. It's in black and white. It's in a parliamentary report. And they will just keep getting hit with that. You know, it'll be, well, your coach said it was unethical, or your right-hand man said it was unethical. And I think that will drag them down eventually. But as I say, let's see how resilient they remain. Just
on the point about not technically having broken any water rules, there is a possibility, though, that if Shane Sutton, if Dr. Freeman decides at some point in the future to confirm what was in the jiffy bag, that on the day that whatever was in that jiffy bag was administered to Bradley Wiggins, that if it was the corticosteroid, then he would have broken water rules.
Yeah, he would have done. Yeah,
and that's why that story is actually so important.
Of course it is. Yeah, that's why I pursued it. You know, that's why when I was told a story about a package being delivered, that's exactly why I pursued it, because the allegation was that an ADRV had been, you know, an anti-doping rule violation had been committed, and while it was difficult to, you know, it was potentially difficult to take it anywhere if everyone just flatly denied it. So I don't know what you're talking about, and none of the facts of what I'd been given stood up. It was the way that they went into meltdown when I started asking questions. It was the way Brailsford tried to stop me running the story that made me think, my God, there's actually something in this. So yes, that is incredibly important. Of course it is, and I actually think. See, you know, we've been quite strong in our coverage this morning. We've used some quite strong words. But the other question is, and of course Wiggins will have medical certificates, you know, they have the submissions of a chest position to support this, but is obtaining a TUE, this is the big question, is obtaining a TUE when there isn't a medical need an ADRV? I think it probably is.
Well, I mean, by WADA's own rules, it says it is. Like, the whole point about a TUE is that it's not supposed to give you an unfair advantage, and you're definitely not supposed to take it if you don't have a medical issue, and you're definitely not supposed to take it if it's just to cover up something that you've been taking out of competition. Yeah. And on all three cases, according to the report today, Sky have failed.
Yeah, and the thing is that is what the MPs have accused them of. And now they are protected by parliamentary privilege. They have gone further than anyone has dared go, because they have that parliamentary privilege. They have that legal protection. But you know, if we focus today on what we can absolutely attack them on, I still come back to the admission that it's unethical, and that for me is big, and that for me is the big problem they have today. The other stuff may or may not follow. You know, the Freeman situation is fascinating. You said just now that, you know, maybe he's happy to take it. I don't think he is happy to take it. I think his life has been ruined. You know, he's got a very serious situation here with the GMC. He hasn't worked since. He's you know, under, from what I understand, immense stress. Is suffering medically as a result of that. So he's far from happy. And the day that he does actually speak will be fascinating, because, you know, presumably he knows an awful lot, and how ethical their use of triamcinolone was is something he can shed a lot of light on. You know, it's you know, we'll go back to the start. This is far from over. This is just the next step. But I do applaud Collins and the committee for the tone of their report, the courage of their report, because I know as a journalist that when you're asking the tough questions of people like Seb Coe, Mo Farah, Bradley Wiggins, Dave Brailsford, these people are national heroes. It's not easy, and I applaud them for what they've done. It's a great piece of work.
I suspect that the way Team Sky have handled the story since the Jiffy bag in late 2015 is almost like the classic duck analogy, that what we actually see is very different to what's actually going on under the water. And you will have seen what was going on under the water. And I wonder, could you explain to us a little bit further in terms of Dave Brailsford's dealings with you specifically, with the media, and, as you said earlier on, how he tried to kill the Jiffy bag story?
Yeah, well, look, it's well documented now. There were. I was presented with different versions of events as to what happened. I was told that Simon Cope, the guy who took the package, wasn't in France to deliver a package. He was there to meet Emma Pooley, the female cyclist, an alibi which exploded in his face when I realised that Emma Pooley wasn't even in France. She was in Spain. They then said that this possible scenario of medication being administered on the back of the bus, something that Shane Sutton essentially confirmed in the parliamentary hearing when he said that the doctor had told him, Freeman had told him that Brad was sorted before they all left La Tuisière, but he said the bus had already left. That proved to be untrue because of a cycling fan's video that was on YouTube that he clearly wasn't aware of. And then there was the final plea at the end of our meeting, sort of 2-hour meeting, when he basically said, if you didn't run the story, is there anything else we could do? Which I took as a desperate attempt to persuade me to not to run it. Which again just sort of said to me, my God, they are so keen for this not to go in. There must be something to this. So yeah, he handled it appallingly. And in fairness to him, he has admitted that, and he actually admitted to me at one stage that I'd done a far better job than he had, because I think he knows how much further damage he inflicted. But I don't really care about that kind of sentiment and that kind of conciliatory tone, because I think there's a much bigger issue here now, and I actually just think that the whole thing is pretty fraudulent. I don't think they are who they say they are. I think the report exposes that, and I think everyone's been a bit conned.
I think the value of a report like this is that it ties together all of the work that you've done and a bunch of other people have done around these stories, and it distills it into an inarguable narrative where we now look at the whole notion of marginal gains, and we're better at science, and we're better at all of our record taking and note taking and understanding aerodynamics and diet and clean pillows and all that kind of stuff. And you realise that is all a bunch of crap, and that the truth is that they were abusing TUEs. We don't know how far back this goes, but it suddenly tarnishes all of the work and all of the career that Brailsford has had, and all of the stuff that Bradley Wiggins has achieved either side of the bit that is in question here. And it continues to raise serious questions about what Team Sky are doing up to this point, notwithstanding we haven't even really spoken about what Chris Froome is doing.
Yeah, and to be honest, what we mustn't forget is I agree with what you just said, but what we mustn't forget actually, that I kind of think they were a busted flush from the moment the Fancy Bear stuff came out. From the moment we saw that Brad had applied for TUEs before the 2012 tour, before the 2011 tour, and before the 2013 Giro to use triamcinolone. A drug that so many specialists have come forward and basically said is completely over the top, completely unnecessary to deal with allergies and asthma. And it's I did the ETAP. I'm a crap amateur cyclist, but I did the ETAP with a load of doctors last summer, and we were all just sat around in the French Alps talking about it, and there must have been 7 doctors in the room. They're all consultants in different areas, but not, to a man, they just said it was ridiculous to prescribe triamcinolone for his condition. And you just listen to that, and you listen to people like John Dickinson down at the University of Kent, who's a respiratory expert and actually manages the the asthma symptoms of quite a few British Olympic athletes, and they just say this is bonkers. You don't need it, and that comes back to what the report is about: medical need versus performance enhancement. And their conclusion is it was about performance enhancement, and I think that's what any sane person can see as well. And it's, you know what, it's actually really depressing, but really important. And you know, I sort of, you know, I'm quite sort of proud of the coverage in the media today, the papers. You know, it's even the front page of the Sun. You know, it's the front page lead in the Sun on a Monday morning. You know, and you just think, wow, you know, that's people care about this stuff.
They do, because sport is supposed to matter and you're supposed to be able to believe what you see. But I guess I was saying earlier that, like, it's not similar to what Lance Armstrong did, and yet the scale of what Team Sky have achieved is reaching that point of Armstrong dominance. If you combine Bradley Wiggins' career with the career of Chris Froome, what Team Sky have achieved in cycling isn't a million miles away from what US Postal were able to do, and we know exactly how US Postal were doing that now. So, like, the entire sport, I think it's actually a really good day for cycling. I did just want to briefly mention, because the Nike Oregon project also comes in for a shorter part of this, and Sebastian Coe, Lord Sebastian Coe, comes out of this awfully today. Now, obviously, Team Sky is going to be the main lead today, but their lawyers and their communications teams are going to be very busy over the next couple of days. Yeah,
like the Coe thing was a story that I worked on actually in tandem with BBC Panorama guys, and it centres around an email that Dave Bedford sent. Dave Bedford became aware that he got approached by Shubakova's people, who told him that basically they were being extorted for money, or had been extorted for money by the DX to conceal her positive drugs test. $500,000, I think, was the figure off the top of my head. And Bedford was a little concerned that there'd apparently been very little response to this. I think we know why now. Because basically the IAAF was rotten to the core at that time under the DIAC administration, and he did what seemed a perfectly sensible thing and thought, well, I'm going to go to the IAAF vice president I know, who I think is a good guy, and alert him to what's going on. He sent an email detailing the Shubakova situation to Seb Coe. Seb Coe then spoke to Parliament in one of their many hearings as part of this report, combating doping in sport, and said that he knew about the situation at the IAAF at a certain time. Bedford's email predated that. I remember being at Euro 2016. It was actually the day of an England game. I forget which fairly awful football match it was, but I was in the press centre before the match, and I rang Coe's spokeswoman and said, right, got an email here from Dave Bedford. This is the date on it, and basically she told me that he hadn't opened it. Now, we do know that Seb is a little 20th century when it comes to modern communication. Doesn't really do text messages, doesn't really do emails. But when an important one comes in, he did at the time, I think, have 2 PAs who would alert him to important stuff. He says he simply forwarded the email to the ethics people at the IAAF without opening it, despite the fact it was from Dave Bedford and it was marked, pretty bloody important, basically. And I always remember Jackie Brock-Doyle, the spokeswoman, saying to me, if he's guilty of anything, it's a lack of curiosity. Now, the committee, as they've kind of expressed in their report, are as sceptical about that as I was, basically. and they've accused him of essentially misleading Parliament that day. So yeah, it's not a good day for Sedco. He's had other such days like this since he became IAAF president, not least because of his terrible speech that he gave when he became IAAF president, and he described Lamine Diack as the spiritual leader of the organisation, spiritual leader who's now at the centre of a criminal financial investigation in France. And it's another one of those days, and it's, you know, it as the committee said, it kind of highlights the importance of investigative journalism and highlights the issues we still have in international sport in 2018.
One last point. It does really highlight the importance for investigative journalism, but also it highlights that these types of committees can do work that, as you've said, parliamentary privilege applies to this, so they can actually speak truth to power in situations like this. And it's hopefully a symbiotic relationship, that everybody keeps each other at arm's length enough to be able to kind of make sure that they're doing their work properly, and you know, that it doesn't just become grandstanding for the sake of it, but that ultimately this might be the best way to tackle anti-doping into the future.
Yeah, it's certainly one way. I still think the best way to tackle anti-doping is to give the agencies proper power, you know, and proper funding. You know, it remain. You know, UCAD have just had their funding doubled, but it's still less than a Championship football team would spend on a new midfielder. You know what I mean? It is nonsense, really. And they're there to protect the credibility of sport. You know, and it's, you know, and they have situations where they actually have to consider the risks of taking on a major sports star who actually has more income than they do, has more millions in the bank than they do, and can send in the big shot lawyers. You know, this is part of the problem. This is part of the challenge. But no, they are very important, and those hearings were incredibly important. And what they did was they really did put people under pressure, because even though they have no real power, even though the last person to get, I think the last time someone was imprisoned for contempt of Parliament was 1666. I don't think it was linked to the Great Fire, but it was the same year for some reason. And you know, they don't have any power, but you get, when you put these people in that chair in front of 12 inquisitive MPs, they do struggle. And we had some amazing moments over the last 16 months. You know, we had you know, Simon Cope being the most memorable one. You know, when they realised that he even had two sets of expenses. So did he drive to Gatwick Airport, or did he get the train? Because he'd actually charged the national governing body for both. And the guy sits there in a room full of MPs and said, "Well, we all fiddle our expenses, don't we?" You know, it's just some incredible moments. You know, fascinating to cover as a journalist, but really important. And I actually think that committee has really served an important purpose, as we've seen today.
Yeah, no, for sure. Matt, great stuff, and in fairness, your work the whole way along has been brilliant, and you've always been great with your time with us as well, so thanks very much for making the time for us today. Yeah. Matt Lawton of the Daily Mail, who has been definitely one of the people who kept that story alive when it might not have seemed profitable to do so, or it might not have been the easiest thing to do, but just piecing those bits together, like finding the video on YouTube and going, well, these guys are lying to me.
Yeah.
They've just lied to me, and I've got the proof here. And it turns out, because just remember, right, to go back, Team Sky were really struggling, and then they got Gert Leinders in, and Leinders was a doctor who previously had worked with Rabobank, and then the team got really good, and then they got rid of Leinders when it emerged that he was going to get a lifetime ban because he'd been involved with Rabo. And they got really good, and they won a bunch of tours with Bradley Wiggins, and then they won a bunch of events and races with Bradley Wiggins, and then they got to this super stratospheric level with Chris Froome over the last number of years. And they've done it by telling us how amazing they are at science, that they're the best scientists, that they understand aerodynamics better, they understand diet, nutrition, they understand logistics better than anybody else. And so therefore you would assume that they are really good at record keeping, and they are really good at making sure that they know exactly what's happening all the time. And their defence in all of these cases has been, didn't keep records for that, and don't actually know what happened there, and no one was really aware of that. That was a solo run by that one individual. So you start picking away at the bits, at the building blocks of their own perceived greatness, and it crumbles. What did we? Oh, we accidentally got testosterone patches sent to. What?
All it takes is for one untruth to create a series of contradictions, and that seems to have been apparent a long time ago. This obviously puts it down into concrete paper where you flick through 50 pages and you're like, wow, this is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. What they've said, to a certain extent, is completely at odds with what has actually occurred. What certain people have said when they've started looking after their own back is at odds with what people have said on the record in Parliament under parliamentary oath. And what I'm very interested in is that it seems to me that we are not even at the stage yet, or even close to the stage, where important members of Team Sky are desperately trying to shed water from the sinking boat. Once that starts to happen, these contradictions are going to grow and grow.
Well, interesting there that the details of the impact this is having on Richard Freeman, the doctor who was apparently bullied by Brailsford and Sutton into being more aggressive with the TUEs. Once he starts to tell everybody what he knows, and it seems like that might happen because he's lost his career and his reputation, and the only way to rescue that now is to go full whistleblower and say, chapter and verse, found my laptop, lads, here's what this was, here's what everything else was. That will actually make everything fall. That's the final piece of that jigsaw. And I think the other thing is, like, do Sky as an organisation really want to be associated with this?
Yeah. Well, the thing, just to revert to your first point there, like, it's important to note that there is a whistleblower who is well respected within the cycling community and held a senior position at Team Sky at the time of the events under investigation, on the record in this report. As soon as somebody else, like, I presume it's not Freeman, who's here, or else Matt would probably would have known if it was Freeman. So I'm going to guess it's not Freeman who this source is. But if he sees there's a former senior member of Team Sky after speaking on the record here, or not on the record, but certainly as a source,
yeah,
then it's like, why not make a name for myself, or not make a name for myself, save my name, because as you pointed out, his reputation has been completely tarnished because he's been made to look like a doctor who can't keep basic medical records, which is being a doctor 101 as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful, isn't it?
It's sort of helpful, yeah. Like, imagine going into your GP and it's like, yeah, I can't really remember what medicine you gave me there in 2011 when I had that pretty serious condition that required 9 capsules of an injection. Would you mind telling me? And it's like, oh, sorry,
I'll get my homework.
Sorry, mate, laptop went missing when I was in Crete. I don't know what part of Greece he was in, to be honest, but...
Yeah. We're going to talk with Cora Staunton in just a minute, but brilliant interview with Marcus O'Sullivan, the legendary middle distance runner, on the show last week, speaking with Joe. Here he is talking about Seoul in '88 and the doping culture that was pervasive around then.
Seeing as 1988 has come up, like, in my memory, I mean, I was only very young at the time, so I don't remember it, but 1988 for me is almost a byword for drugs and the dirtiest race, the 100 metres, so infamous and everything. Was that swirling around your time? Were you very aware of that, or is it only in hindsight you realised, or what was going on in your particular event? And I'm not casting aspersions on anybody, not least your friend who you mentioned.
Yeah, it's actually you're referring to the 100 metres in 88 South Korea. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone in the world was shocked, including us, but we were shocked for different reasons. In the village, I always remember we knew the public was shocked outside. Ghastly, how could this be happening? We were shocked inside that somebody actually had the courage to expose it.
Yeah.
So our shock was different. We were all collectively shocked, but for different reasons. And it was an interesting observation to have made that we were as shocked as the outsiders looking in. And our shock was just totally different, that we were encouraged by the fact that somebody had stood up and, obviously released the information that it was like a dam breaking and there was no going back after this point. And I think that was the reality of it at that time.
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff from Marcus O'Sullivan. You should download the full podcast or get the full thing on our YouTube channel. A couple of comments coming in a little bit earlier on about the Arsenal situation. Arsenal Fan TV is more entertaining than watching them these days. Sky might buy them over. And Liverpool are only 2 or 3 players off City if they can just keep their current players too. And if is capitalised by Sholmo on Facebook. I mean, when you've just sold Coutinho and Bobby Firmino steps up and starts doing the things he's doing, you're like, oh man. or Sal, would you just stop scoring now for the rest of the season? You know, we can coast into third and everybody go, oh, maybe his form is lost, we'll give him one more season at Liverpool just to make sure. But
it's too late. Sal has sold himself. I think it was Manchester United that Dan says is the most likely candidate for chasing down Manchester City next year. I would have to say it's Liverpool. Like as you mentioned, like a goalkeeper is key, but a little bit more cohesion when it comes to the centre halves as well will go a long way to them solidifying. Like more clean sheets is how Liverpool win the Premier League, no question. And I think that'll go a long way to doing that.
The difference in City's defence this season from last season, and it's not just all down to the goalkeeper, it's down to the whole team being better and them controlling games in a way that they weren't just able to do. And the whole Pep thing finally getting through to everybody. Like, you do feel like Liverpool would benefit inordinately from having that goalkeeper situation.
Yeah, but Ederson has proved that, hasn't he? I mean, like, there is a certain element that's completely correct because he seems to be the one person that's changed everything, whereas elsewhere it's kind of been this perfect system that anybody, I mean, I don't say anybody, I say a very, very good professional footballer can slot into and do a relatively good job. And I don't want to kind of underplay the importance of Emerick Laporte or Alexander Zinchenko, who've come in, as we discussed earlier, very seamlessly and done extremely well, and they're extremely good footballers. I do think there is a certain element of plug and play that, as long as Pep doesn't badly identify talents, they will come into the system that he's created here and do extremely well, and that's a credit to the manager.
Yeah, I mean, I think Klopp is really good. I think that things just take a little bit longer at a club where you don't have the endless oil wealth to be able to just do whatever changes, make them immediately, because you can just go and spend 200 million on fullbacks and then it's somebody else extra who's actually going to be your starting fullback at the end of the season.
I wonder, does a manager like Pep prefer to have that endless oil resource? Because whenever I'd start up a new game on Football Manager, I start thinking to myself, do I do the cheat where I can give myself endless amounts of money, or do I play honestly? Like, do I want the real authenticity of figuring out problems? But I 10 times out of 10 always just take the cheat, and basically you can set up another profile, sell one of your crappiest players for 200 million to another club, and then to your second club, then you can spend all that money all you like, and it's a lot of fun. Pep is having a lot of fun having all that money.
That's rubbish.
Well, it does completely.
You're a doper. At heart, you're a doper.
Yeah, I'm a financial doper.
Yeah.
Like, who wouldn't want to be a financial doper?
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
If you could financially dope yourself, you would inject yourself with that sweet cash.
This is revealing.
But I'm not saying that I would physically dope myself, but certainly financially. Yeah, I've done it, just in the virtual realm rather than the real realm.
Yeah. Okay. So, what else is going on?
You're asking that to me rather than through the glass there.
I'm also asking a bit through the glass.
We might have one more piece coming up, but I might just run you through remind you of the back pages that have revolved around the football, as we were mentioning earlier on. And there's a couple of those great naked gun puns doing the rounds. The Irish Examiner went with naked gunners this morning, and the Wenger quote, if you missed earlier on, when you are naked completely, you have to try and find a shirt and get dressed properly again, which is, it's something we can all relate to. He's not wrong, so to speak. It may or may not be a little bit of panic stations from him.
It doesn't give you a huge amount of confidence, does it?
No. Broken gunners are pants was the back of the mirror in relation to those closed quotes. It's 4 defeats in a row, and Wenger does a Cantona, saying his dire flops feel like they've lost their trousers. And then the other good pun on that, naked guns was the back of the Sun. Who's telling him to go? Who's telling him it's time to go, lads? Says the speech bubble beside Steve Bowles' head. Wenger exposed. That's actually a good pun. As Koscielny says, boss must share the blame.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the newspaper headlines. The Mail, as we've been talking about, Wiggins did take drug to win tour. It's also the lead on the back of the Times Ireland edition. Wiggins accused by MPs. Ireland beat Holland in cricket, and the good folk of North Kildare were helping the Irish rugby team to get out and about around Carton House. They came and answered the call to dig out some of the facilities for the Irish rugby team to use. Every scintilla of credibility is gone after inquiry finds Wiggins abused anti-doping system to win the tour. Can Team Sky continue? Well, they can continue is the thing. It's just whether or not Sky want to continue to pump cash in to be associated with a toxic brand. Not really a move that you would have seen too often from the Murdoch family, pumping money into something that was, damaging their own brand. Anyway, We'll move on quickly. That's pretty much all we've got time for. We will talk to Cora Staunton a little bit later on in the week, just having some difficulties establishing a proper Skype connection. So we'll kick that back to later on in the week. Scored a wonder goal at the weekend. Obviously had her nose broken and played on. So it's been an eventful couple of weeks for Cora. She's doing great stuff down in Australia in the Aussie Rules League, and we'll talk to her about her plans for the summer, etc. That's coming up on tomorrow's show. Monday night, no doubt there'll be massive continuing reaction to the Bradley Wiggins story, and of course look back at the football of the weekend, and we'll begin to look forward, I guess, to what happens next week, because the GAA is going to kick back into overdrive potentially in the middle of the week, but definitely at the end of. But yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much all we have time for. We'll see you tomorrow. Good luck.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.